Hi, my name is Daudi Mugabi and this is Business Mike episode 32. My guest today is Fabian Guhl. He's the founder and managing director of AMPION, an organization that supports startup entrepreneurs. In this episode, Fabian shares the impact of AMPION venture bus trips on the African continent. All this and more next on Business Mike. Thank you so much for joining us today on Business Mike. Could you briefly tell us who you are and what you do?
Of course, thanks for having me. I'm Fabian, founder and managing director of AMPION. AMPION is a Pan-African organization that stands for Amplifying Pioneership. We are running programs in 15 African countries with a focus on startup development and innovation through digital technology.
What's the history of AMPION? Could you just explain to us how it came to be?
I was always interested in making an impact. This is why I joined the African Development Bank Group as an intern for 6 months in 2007. This was my first experience on the African continent. After that experience, I decided to go to the United Nations after my studies, because I liked how big organizations work towards a common goal. At the same time, I realized that I have a strong entrepreneurial spirit and that I was interested in running projects on my own and shaping them in an ideally fast-paced environment. This is why I changed my career and I decided to become an entrepreneur myself. The first venture I built up was a responsible or sustainable fashion label for shoes. We would produce shoes in a prison produced by convicts that made money through the production of shoes. I also worked on setting up an event agency and a mobile app, and I also worked for business angels and two fast-growing e-commerce startups in Germany, and one of them we also took to several emerging markets.
Right. And how did you make the transition from these entrepreneurial ventures of yours into AMPION Venture Bus?
I also had some failures, which is part of every entrepreneurial story. And after one of the startups I was running went bankrupt, I came across the project of the bus, of the founder bus, taking young people with an interest in founding something on a bus and supporting them with mentorship and ideally also funding, and also inspire young people to become entrepreneurs. And I've been running this project together with my colleagues in Europe for a couple of years, 3 years in a row, and we took it to 6 countries. And in year number 4, I was looking for a new challenge, and I had the idea to run the program in Africa. So we launched our first pilot bus in 2013. We took 40 people from Zimbabwe to South Africa, and we had a very strong interest in the program. We had a lot of applications from Africa, but also from the rest of the world. And we decided to take also internationals on board that would fly in from Silicon Valley, for example, with an interest in doing business in Africa. But of course, we also focused on the Africans on board. And since the pilot, which was very successful, we scaled the concept to 5 buses across the continent. We also implemented focus areas. So each bus is now focusing on a different sector. For example, agri, tech and technology, healthcare and technology, green technology, and also financial inclusion. So those are some of the programs we are running. And we also launched the second step in the value chain of creating a startup, which is our AMPION Fellowship Program. So what we are doing with our two-folded program, the Venture Bus and the Fellowship Program, is that we go out with the buses across 15 African countries, and we are trying to source the best ideas that we will then develop for a period of 6 months with our fellowship program. So it's really scouting ideas and building prototypes on the buses. And then as a second step, selecting the best startups from the buses and taking them on our fellowship program, providing them mainly with mentoring, but also with funding.
Right, that's interesting because you've got entrepreneurs on the bus as well as mentors. So what kind of activity takes place on the bus between the mentors and the entrepreneurs? What exactly happens?
Every bus trip is designed to run for 7 days. Every day is combined with a milestone, which is based on design thinking methodology. The milestone of day number 1 is getting to know each other, but also trying to identify local problems you want to work on as an individual. And then the second day would be forming a team around these problem areas and coming up with a technology solution to solve these problems. And then for the next couple of days, there is milestones like creating a prototype, a business model, and a pitch. So the first 2 days are very relevant and important, not only because our entrepreneurs are meeting their teammates, but also because we are taking the bus and we are going out to rural areas where we are engaging with local communities in order to evaluate what kind of problems are out there. And this is also one of the main reasons why we are taking the bus and why we are driving around, because we are conducting field visits where we are trying to find the problems in the country and then develop solutions together with our participants on board. And I believe this makes our program unique because there is a lot of innovation and startup weekends going on in innovation hubs across the continent, but often those innovation camps are very limited to the capitals or the big cities, whereas the rural areas are left out. And we believe that there is a lot of innovative solutions to be made for rural areas and urban areas.
Right. And how do you determine what kind of entrepreneurs get onto the bus? What kind of things do you look out for in the people you choose for these trips?
Passion is the most important requirement to join our program, because we believe that passion is the fuel to start and run a company. Without that, the company will not survive because it's pretty hard to start off a company. In terms of hard skills, of course, we are looking for some technical skills, in particular software engineers, but also web designers and business experts. So those are the 3 main disciplines we are getting on board. But of course, we are also looking for specialists in the areas we are working on. So for example, our upcoming bus in November in Southern Africa will be focusing on agriculture and technology. So here we are looking for software engineers, web designers, and business experts, but more importantly, also for people that have experience with agricultural projects.
Now, having done a number of AMPION trips over the years, I'm certain you've seen a good number of brilliant ideas being generated by the entrepreneurs on the different trips you've taken. What are some of those ideas that stand out in your opinion?
There is very interesting models in all buses. I'm personally very impressed with some of our programs with a focus on healthcare. We have had, for example, a program last year in East Africa where we had a team that developed an app called Mobidava, which is a directory of medicine worldwide, combined with an alert functionality to remind patients when they have to take their medicine. And I believe this is a very practical example of a technology that also solves a real problem. We also have had interesting models in the fields of education, but also in hardware. We have, for example, had one successful startup based out of Zimbabwe called SciSci. They developed a technology based on Raspberry Pis that would provide connectivity, Wi-Fi on minibuses in Zimbabwe.
And do any of these ideas get some financial backing, particularly those that stand out?
Yes. Well, from our side, in our fellowship program, we provide financial stipends, which allow our entrepreneurs to focus on their startups for 6 months. This is not a seed investment. We call it a pre-seed investment because it's more like a scholarship. But then, of course, we have a network of business angels and also seed investors that are interested in the ideas that are being developed on board of the buses. And yes, we have some success stories. For example, one of our alumni from West Africa last year called TopCheck in Nigeria, they recently raised $1.5 million in seed capital, which is an impressive amount of money for a good team.
Now, obviously, you've been privileged enough to travel across East Africa, West Africa, Southern Africa. You've experienced various cultures and landscapes. Which one of these bus trips is your favorite? Which one strikes you the most?
I, of course, like all bus trips, and I don't really have a favorite trip. I have some favorite countries. I'm very much impressed by Rwanda, because in Rwanda you have a very safe environment. It's a small country, so it's easy to get things done. It's also very clean, and it has a good investment climate. Of course, I'm also impressed by Nigeria, for example, for the growth it's showing, but also simply by the size of the country and economy. But again, every country has its own pros and cons and specialties. So besides those two, I don't have any favorite. There's beauty to be found in every country and also interesting projects.
Earlier on, you mentioned that traveling on a bus helps the entrepreneurs see some of the problems that they can solve. But apart from that, what other advantages are there to creating an environment for brainstorming on a bus versus, say, doing the whole thing in a hub, in a building somewhere? What are the differences in the two, and why did you choose to go with the bus?
First of all, you cannot really leave the bus when you're traveling, so it's really a high level of bonding and getting to know each other. Also, traveling and working at the same time creates a very intense atmosphere. People sometimes even get sick of traveling. And at the same time, our participants are facing a lot of challenges which are linked to our milestones and the upcoming pitches. So it's really like a pressure cooker. At the same time, traveling opens the mind in general, and our participants, they use every stop to go out and talk to either locals to test their idea and products, or when visiting hubs, talking to different investors, which is also a way to connect the different innovation ecosystems across the continent. And we often see that the innovation hubs are not really linked to each other. And creating these links through our bus trips is definitely helping to build the entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Based on your experience, particularly on the African continent, what have you learned from some of these young African entrepreneurs? What traits are you noticing amongst some of these young people that are coming up with these innovations?
There is a very strong drive in many young Africans I've come across to innovate, to build startups, not only to make money, but also to bring the African continent and their countries forward. And this is something that I can't often see in Europe, for example. I do think that people are very excited. They understand that it's a time right now where they can change something and implement business ideas that create an impact.
Now, how far has AMPION come since its inception in 2013? What changes have you seen over time? What few adjustments have you made? And what are your plans for the future?
In terms of numbers, we are proud that we have been running around 10 buses since the beginning. And on each bus, we have had between 40 and 50 participants. So how we see it is we inspired all these young people to become entrepreneurs. And they also used the 7 days bus trip as a training to become real entrepreneurs. And we changed the lives of many people. Many people, they go on the bus and they are first-time entrepreneurs, and they really liked it. So they decided to become entrepreneurs and try to set up companies. And every time you're trying to set up a company, you're improving your skills, and the the possibility of achieving something is even greater. So this is what we've been doing in the past. We are not necessarily looking anymore for scaling like crazy and in increasing our numbers only. Right now, we are looking at supporting the ventures we have been built and sourcing ventures out of our network to provide them with sustainable growth. So what we are really trying to achieve now is venture building instead of just inspiring people to build new startups.
AMPION, based on the way you've described it, is a bus trip that puts together entrepreneurs and helps them come up with an idea that can help their community. So in a scenario where we have an entrepreneur who already has an existing idea, let's say in the medicine industry, if we are having a trip about medicine, but I already have my own idea, how would you incorporate me on your bus? What happens in a situation like that?
Okay, so existing teams, they have the opportunity to apply to our venture bus. But if they are already around and if they have already an idea, a product, or potentially revenue, I would strongly recommend them to apply to our fellowship program, which is designed for startups that are already on the market. What can we provide through the fellowship program? First of all, the fellowship program is not only open for startups from our bus, it's also open to any startups from the African continent. It's a 6-month program. Number one, we provide them with financial support. They get scholarships, which will enable them to focus 100% of their time on the actual startup instead of having another job, for example. If it's a healthcare medicine startup, we will connect the team to mentors in that field. We also have partner companies. We work, for example, with Bayer and Merck. So those big corporations in pharma, they are also looking to work with startups. And then we are also running boot camps twice a year. One boot camp is a gathering of all our fellowship startups where we are also inviting our mentors. So it's very important to actually have a trustworthy relationship between the mentor and the mentee, and the Innovation Bootcamp is providing that opportunity. We're also organizing demo days through a second bootcamp we're organizing. One of them will be taking place in Germany and the other one in a location in Africa. So all of this is what we are providing through the fellowship program.
How many bus trips do you have on average every year?
We scaled this year to 5 bus trips. We are currently re-evaluating the strategy of the AMPION venture buses. We are going to run buses next year. We don't know yet how many, because as I said earlier, we are not so much looking for numbers of buses anymore. We are looking to better support the startups that exist already.
And so if I want to participate, how can I get more information about the upcoming bus trips?
The best thing would be to go to our website, ampion.org, ampion.org, and then click on the sign up for a newsletter symbol, and you will be informed via our newsletter about the upcoming venture bus trips, regions, and dates.
Right, so if you had a time machine and you could travel back in time to meet yourself as an 18-year-old, what book would you recommend to yourself and what movie would you encourage yourself to watch?
Right, that's a tough one because there's so many things I've learned since I was 18. There is one book called The End of Power by Moises Naim, and it's a historical investigation of the shift of power from authoritative governments, militaries, and so on to individuals. And I believe this is a very important book, and also it has become a Silicon Valley cliche by now, because it's also informing the readers about disruptive startups. And I believe this is very relevant for the startup entrepreneur, but also as a general rule in life. A movie, there is one movie called Carlos the Shackle. It's about a terrorist that has been sentenced in France. He's still sitting in prison. So it's a story about a young guy in Latin America who started with good intentions and then became a terrorist. And the result of him being a terrorist, now he's sitting in prison. And I believe this is also a story where young people can learn from, because it's about intrinsic motivation and what you can do with it.
And if you could send a message to yourself in the future with a piece of encouragement or advice, what would that be?
I would say that it's always important to focus on your goals, and everything is possible. Just think about what you really want, make up your mind about it, set the goal and go for it. And I believe this is an advice that counts for people that are young and also old, so for everyone.
Well, I've asked you so many questions today, and so if the tables were turned, what would the one question you'd ask me be?
What is the meaning of life?
Well, that's the second time I've been asked this question, and the first time round I didn't have a very good answer. But upon some reflection, I think the meaning of life is finding happiness, and not just temporary happiness, but rather true happiness that actually feeds your soul. And so I think we are meant to find what it is that makes us genuinely happy and try and experience that for the rest of our lives.
Beautiful.
Right. So how can we get in touch with yourself and as well as AMPION and learn more about what it is that you do on social media or our website?
You can visit our website on ampion.org, and you can also find us on social media. We are on facebook.com/ampion.org and on Twitter on Ampion Africa.
Well, thank you so much, Fabian, for taking the time to do this interview, and we wish you the very best with AMPION.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for listening to Business Mike today. And if you'd like to listen to more episodes just like this one, simply go to businessmike.com. I would love to hear from you. So if you've got any questions or suggestions about the show, simply drop me an email at daudi@businessmike.com. Thanks again for listening, and until next Monday, take care.